Isekai ruin fantasy. Isekai, or the subgenre of fantasy translating to the other world, or different world, has gripped the modern anime scene from 2010 and onward. Stories that use this idea typically have a protagonist coming from Earth and usually Japan, entering a fantasy world, whether by dying in their original world or transitioning into the next. While some animanga escape the outbounds of the medieval fantasy world into the world of sci-fi or historical fiction, many do not. Do not mistake my words. There are plenty of great isekai, such as Re:Zero, Ascendance of a Bookworm, and Log Horizon. However, I do believe that fantasy, at least in the sphere of animanga, has been ruined by isekai for several reasons that I will make throughout the video. Before I begin, I would like to make it clear that this is not a video complaining about the oversaturation of isekai in the market, nor is it a video to hate on specific shows in particular. It is a video dedicated to scrutinizing the death of the fantasy genre and the problems endemic to isekai. Finally, it is a video on how isekai and fantasy can be done better. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin. I am not mincing words here when I say that isekai has killed fantasy, but what exactly is fantasy in the first place? Fantasy, as I define it, is a work predicated in an imagined world, with some rules unknown to ours. Broad, I know, but the imagined world could be Earth yet altered, or a world different down to the color of the sky and the swaying of the grass. Moving back to my abrasive claim, Isekai has killed fantasy because authors have become formulaic in their world building. The world building between series has become identical, only using different names for the same places. Of course, there are exceptions, but the majority rhyme. From adventurers' guilds to magic academies, dungeons with cores to demon castles. These locations are uninspired. Fantasy is killed by formulas because the reader lacks anything to explore. This is evident in manga, anime, light novels, and web novels. Additionally, what especially hurts is the bleeding of these tropes into regular fantasy. It is the exploration of the world that the author has created that arguably makes good fantasy. Consequently, the way that characters interact with the world is equally important. Certainly, common isekai tropes can be subverted in interesting and unique ways, but often they aren't. Uniqueness is important, which is why these familiar tropes ruin authors' worlds before they can even tell their stories. This is not coming from a person with little experience in reading these types of books. In fact, this video was prompted by me sitting down to read, only realizing how boring these books have become to me, forcing me to drop it only halfway through a first chapter. Dry retellings of the same story has forced me to drop countless manga, manhwa, and web novels. Predicting a plot is certainly not fun. The unfortunate phrase, once you read them, you've read all of them, applies here because nothing new is accomplished with these works. Maybe this point is drawn up because I've read countless bad books, but I have finished the known good ones already. This has made me question whether reading manga in the first place is even worth my time. If you have any good recommendations, please leave them in the comments. I am literally starving for a good book. Before I continue, if you like videos like this and would like to see more in the future, please consider subscribing. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. With that out of the way, let's continue. The state of modern, pure fantasy anime is dismal. Taken over by this amorphous desire to make everything isekai for no apparent reason. Even the most imaginative worlds are rotted by this need, where many simply don't need the tag. Two examples of this unnecessary malediction are The Weakest Tamer Began a Journey to Pick Up Trash and The Faraway Paladin. Here, I went out of my way to find series that I personally rated highly, but simply do not need to be an isekai. I bring up these two because it is important that I differentiate good stories from bad isekai. You can be a good story and be a bad isekai, and you could be a good isekai but be a bad story. In The Weakest Tamer Began a Journey to Pick Up Trash, our main character is a girl named Femicia, later named Ivy, who is born into unfortunate circumstances because of her taming ability of 0 stars. Seen as a bad omen, she is abused and driven out by the people of Laotomi village as they seek to kill her. With the help of the fortune teller, she gains survival knowledge to help her out on her journey. I am a fan of the world building in the series, especially its focus on people on the ground. Our main character quite literally digs through heaps of trash to make use of things that people have thrown away, like expired potions. She makes bonds with people that you otherwise wouldn't read about. Even though I dislike lit RPG in fantasy, the system works quite well because the author built in discrimination and lore surrounding it. Also, it isn't a case where she's actually super powerful like in other shows, though I digress. Circling back to the central topic of this section, it doesn't need to be an isekai. Ivy does not need to have knowledge of a past life she barely remembers. In fact, very few times are we ever even recalled to her previous life. One argument in favor says it helps mental fortitude and acts as a guide to Ivy. However, this can be accomplished without having it be a past life. These are lazy excuses. Just imagine if in the Ocarina of Time, Navi was just Link's past life. What I'm saying is that there are multiple ways to accomplish this dynamic without it being an isekai, and therefore it's an irrelevant characteristic of the series. To all extents, Ivy is in a world that is not foreign to her. It is not another world. It is her world. This makes it a bad isekai because the author does not use her past life to accomplish any major story beats. In The Faraway Paladin, the main character, Will, is a boy raised by 3 undead heroes, Blood, Mary, and Gus, each of them teaching him how to live, educating him on the ways of the world, all within the inhospitable city of the dead. He soon leaves to embark on a journey with the kind protection of Gracefiel, the goddess of the flame, to guide him to become a paladin. This one feels insulting with how little the isekai tag matters. Not only does he forget his past life, it actually just never comes up again from how far I've read. While there are other isekais that have this stupid, forgotten past life moment, the reason why I chose this one in particular is because it is incredibly compelling, both in its narrative and its world building. It could have just been pure fantasy, and it is good fantasy. It's an imaginative world to explore. It just isn't an isekai, and yet it has the tag. The novel, so carefully and compassionately written, is relegated to a genre that doesn't fit it. Ultimately, the point of categorization for people that want to find stories they want to read is meaningless. If I root out isekai from the genres I want to read, I will not find this story. There is merit to isekai. I am not going to one-sidedly bash a genre that I so often read, nor am I going to forget the countless stories, good, great, and amazing that I've read over the years. So what can isekais in the future do to be better? I am not going to prescribe the way to be a good show or series, because that itself is harmful to an author's vision, and goes against my own arguments of formula. However, I can provide a, honestly, quite broad idea of how isekais can be better isekais. That is, have the main character, or whoever reincarnated or transitioned, react to coming into contact with a world fundamentally different than the one they have known prior. The author must make use of the character grasping with the unfamiliar, and have the past life dictate how the character reacts to peculiarities. Here, I am not saying what their reaction should be, nor am I saying that all should constantly mention how weird the world is. Honestly, that would be kind of annoying. I am saying that there should be a reason why the author chose this genre. There should be implications for a past life in the next. I am saying that if Chenkov's gun was used on the isekai genre, it would be out of ammo. If authors made isekai like this, there would be no reason to rely on the endless gimmicks. Ultimately, what is the point if authors aren't willing to make use of the genre they are supposedly writing for? Here, it makes it harder to find stories that we can all enjoy. Like I said earlier, if you like these videos and would like to see more in the future, please consider subscribing. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. Alright, see you next time.